Ex-drinkers of Reddit, what was your damn I need to stop moment? Cowboy Fleaborg said. Anxiety made me drink to excess. Hangovers made me so anxious I could barely function even after the normal symptoms went away. So, I drank to kill the anxiety. Then I got anxious about it. So I drank to kill the anxiety. Then I got anxious about it. I've been cutting down to a point where just a couple is actually two. It's a work in progress. Diorama said. I was into a friend of mine, really into him. We had incidentally shared 3 apartments and 2 roommates at different times. This was discovered over the course of several conversations. We thought it was so cool and funny and we'd always have a laugh and get excited about it. One day I brought it up when he was sober. Wow, isn't it such a crazy coincidence that we've lived at so many of the same places with so many of the same people? He was like, what? I had to explain it to him and it hit me like a sack of bricks that he wasn't even really present during the whole process of me falling for him over the last few months. He would also get angry at our friends when he was drunk. He had trouble keeping a job then. We hooked up a few times despite my better judgment and one day he asked me, so what are we? Why aren't we dating? I finally had to explain to him that while I really liked him and wanted him, I just couldn't put myself through the pain of not knowing if he was even going to remember a conversation or if he would suddenly get angry or if he'd get let go from work because of his drinking. We ended up becoming friends again later, and I'm happily dating someone who is wonderful and doesn't drink. He was really crushed by it at the time and it was a loss for me as well. I now work in substance use treatment and it's so heartbreaking to see how many people's lives are touched by alcoholism. I don't drink myself and I know it can be used safely and in moderation, but it's something we're not adequately teaching people to be cautious about. Zeldler said. People not remembering things is so frightening to me, especially when I thought they were sober enough. I had a friend and we decided to move in together. We hung out a lot prior, we'd have girls' nights going out, or she'd come over to watch movies. I'd often bring out my popcorn machine. It's an air popper and I love it. Anyway, we move in together, we're organizing stuff in the kitchen and she goes, wow, a popcorn machine. That's awesome. I'm like, you've used it like at least 10 times. She ended up getting sober, or at least, she said so. She went to meetings, stopped going to the bar and stopped having a social life, was angry all the time, and would leave food burning in the oven and fall asleep on her patio with a lit cigarette in hand. We aren't friends anymore. Few Kidamouth said. I threw up every morning and passed out drunk every night for about 3 years. At the end of it I was throwing up blood and my eyes turned yellow. I had a fatty liver and my plan was to keep drinking until I got cirrhosis and then I'd kill myself. At some point I started hearing things and getting the shakes so bad by 5 p.m. that I couldn't send texts. I was only 23 at the time. I got fired from my job for showing up drunk too many times, and at 10 a.m. I went to a liquor store and bought a half-gallon of the cheapest vodka they had. Didn't tell anyone I got fired for like 3 days. Something in me just broke. I kept looking down the hole and thinking, if I go to the hospital I can't drink there. I can't interview for jobs anymore because I can't be drunk for those. I can't continue to exist without money, and I'm already in debt. I wouldn't admit to anyone what was wrong, even though they knew. Somehow my mom made me an appointment to see a therapist, and that was the first time I ever admitted my issue. It felt like the weight of the world was lifted off of my shoulders, and I was happy. I told my parents first, then my friends. My friend Kenny gave me this book called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle while I smoked like 300 cigarettes on the porch of my house. Poured out all of my liquor and went to rehab to check myself in. It's been about 8 years since then, and I haven't drank since. Few Kidamouth said. Thanks. In a weird way, I'm glad it happened. I wouldn't say I'm thankful for it, but quitting drinking was the first time in my life that I really, truly realized that I have the power to change things about myself. I remember getting pissed at doctors for not giving me a pill to fix my stomach problems, anxiety, depression, and panic attacks. Turns out if you're a raging alcoholic, a pill doesn't fix it. Few Kidamouth said. Hell yeah. Way happier. I didn't really have much happiness before, outside of hollow glimpses of it. If I continued to drink, I probably would have gone the route of cirrhosis then suicide. Shortly after I got sober, I got the opportunity to work a dream job and traveled all around and had a blast while doing it. My mindset shifted from wanting to be a scheming and lying asshole to wanting to be honest and helpful. I started working out and focusing on nutrition, whereas before I just ate like half a sandwich a day and threw it up. I weigh more than I did before I stopped drinking, but I'm leaner now. The biggest change is the overall mental state. Every day was fucking exhausting, trying to manage an addiction, have enough time to get drunk, and finally filter every action I did through my drunk mind's perception of how a sober person would act. Once I was free of all that mental overhead, I could apply that power elsewhere. And for the first time, I wanted to participate in hobbies I liked, to participate in relationships, and to help others. Impressive Raisin 74 said, "It was a long process that involved me slowly realizing that every time I drank I did something I didn't like myself for. I used alcohol as a tool to hurt myself, and I used it as an excuse to act on my worst emotions. There were no good or fun times I had while drunk that wouldn't have been just as good or better without alcohol. I'd have a shit day at work, go home and drink about it, wake up with a hangover, have a shit day at work. My family or my partner would do something to upset me, I'd drink about it, and become explosively angry, usually ending up with me breaking shit and passing out. Wake up the next day feeling horrible physically and so embarrassed that I'd acted that way. My parents were both lifelong alcoholics and my mother has wet brain, alcohol-induced psychosis. She has no idea who I am. She is only 52 years old and she doesn't recognize me. I can't end up like that. I have 5 months sober under my belt. And I have today." Bostickler said, "Yeah, I've been there, although typically my habit is small amounts over extremely long periods of time instead of getting thrashed all at once. I was pretty much slightly buzzed for about 15 years until I cut back. For what it's worth, I've found that a lot of the fun and happiness I felt when getting trashed was mostly from me, not the alcohol. I used to think I needed it to be outgoing and happy around people, but it turns it's plenty possible to do all that with 2-3 beers. Give it a shot sometime. The only thing better than raging and going wild is waking up the next day realizing you can actually do fun things because you're not obliterated." Tyler011 said, "Not a drinker, but a son of an addict. Ever see a dead turkey fly again on Thanksgiving? That was enough for me to not pick up alcohol, or any drugs for that matter. Forget the amount of times the police were called to my home, or the amount of times I had to drive into Philly at 1 in the morning to drop my father at a whorehouse while I wait outside for him to get back on a school night, or the amount of times I'd witness my mother or my brothers getting bullied or hit, or the amount of times we'd get pulled over because someone called the cops after witnessing my father opening the bottle of vodka and taking a few swigs before getting in the car. At least he threw away the plastic wrapping around the cap in the trash before getting in. Or the amount of times I dread coming home from school not knowing if it would be a cordial evening to do homework or another crazy night of hostel living. Yeah, none of those really take the cake. The turkey in the oven getting smashed into the kitchen wall was enough for me. Ruined Thanksgiving for me for 22 years. Wasn't until I met my wife that I began to like Thanksgiving again. Took a couple years with her, but she was patient with me, and managed to sort of rekindle a good relationship with the holiday, and I hope one day I can say I love Thanksgiving again. But now that my child is 1, I think that may happen as I make more memories with him as a father. Thank you for reading." Trunkata said, "I started drinking at 24, and it turns out that it takes way more than normal to get me drunk. Since I've never gotten drunk with other people, I didn't have any perspective on what was a normal or healthy amount to drink, and ended up drinking a fifth of vodka mixed with soda most evenings. I never got sick or hungover from this. One day I thought I'd have a little extra fun and I drank a pint of vodka in addition to my usual fifth, went to bed feeling fine, and woke up to find that the sheer volume of alcohol I put through my body destroyed part of my stomach lining. I was in complete agony for a month and couldn't eat, drink, or sleep for more than a few hours a day. Even when I did recover, I ended up with vitamin deficiencies from the damage to my stomach that caused severe neurological issues mimicking MEs. That was 5 years ago as of next week, and I still have no intentions of drinking again." Del Campo 1 said, "I hit a traffic cone with my vehicle. Someone called the cops. I blew over 3 times the legal limit and barely remember my encounter with the police. Upon my release from jail, they gave me a machine that I had to blow into 3 times a day. This machine sent a signal to the county telling them whether or not I'd been drinking. I drank again and failed this test and was thrown back in jail. I hate being in jail and had my last drink on June 10, 2017. I am forever grateful to the prosecuting attorney for forcing me to blow into that machine. If I hadn't have had to do that, I probably wouldn't have stopped drinking. I'm 30, but I feel that there's a high chance that I'd be dead or in prison right now if I had kept on drinking. Me staying sober from alcohol, and hard drugs for that matter, is one of my most important achievements in life. My life is different but so much better abstaining from alcohol. Sleepy Dragon 76 said, "There were many drunken nights that I angered and embarrassed those closest to me. Even put many in danger while driving absolutely hammered. The one moment for me was, I was a +1 at a wedding my girlfriend was a bridesmaid in. I was mixing Xanax and whiskey to kill my nerves. Barely knew anyone there aside from my GF, her family was also there for this, but by the end of the night everyone knew me and most certainly not in the best way. Me and the GF had a verbal blowout outside the reception and once it felt like all eyes were on me I hoofed it home 5 miles and was barely able to walk the next day. Blacking out and shitting myself 4 months earlier should have been a wake-up call, but the downward spiral persisted. Coincidentally, I've been having a really hard fucking week mentally and have felt very close to relapse, but hopefully this reflection on why I got sober will keep me on track. I'll be 3 years this September. Me and the GF are also going strong and I'm so grateful she didn't quit on me, cause there's no doubt I could very easily quit on myself. Fucking AskReddit, you got me in my feels RN." Bangkokney said, "It wasn't any one event but the realization that I've been daily drinking quite heavily for 26 years, since I was 13. I could easily drink a crate of beers and chase down a bottle of my whiskey in an evening. Many drunken episodes, too many blackouts, too many times asking myself, what happened last night? Lockdowns came and my drinking increased. Would stay up as late as I could, still had to function in some sense the next day and couldn't have zero sleep. And when I couldn't stay up any later to get to the level of drunk I needed, I just started drinking earlier and earlier through the day. I'd make excuses like, eating the leftover Thai dinner at 11 a.m. justifies beers because the food is spicy. I come from a family of alcoholics and was borderline a functional alcoholic myself. That was my problem too, being a functional drunk. No random violence, no police trouble. Just massive harm to myself instead, physically and mentally. Finally said enough is enough and am coming up on 6 months dry." A Prickly Cactus said, "Was it the potential DUIs and tragedies I narrowly avoided through sheer dumb luck? Was it the constant fights with my wife about how drunk I got all the time? Was it the 2-day hangovers because I didn't know how to not black out? Was it the inability to remember important things that had happened a day or 2 before? It was none of those. As I laid on my bed with my 3rd killer hangover in as many days, my favorite 7-year-old comes into my room. 'You don't have to go to work today? That means you can play with me.' He was so excited. 'Not right now, bud. I feel kind of sick. Let me just rest for a little while longer, okay?' His face went from the happiest I'd seen him in a while, to tremendously sad. The next words he said were all I needed to hear. 'You never want to play anymore. You're always sick.' And as he walks away to find his mom, so that she could play with him instead of me, my heart broke in two. And then those 2 halves broke into a million more pieces. I quit drinking a month or 2 later, New Year's Eve 2016/2017, and haven't touched a drop since." I do not know what said. I was a binge drinker and it was a problem. But I always just wrote it off as letting off some steam and having a good time. Then one night I got the drunk munchies and threw chicken nuggets in the oven at like 3 a.m. and promptly passed out. Filled the house with smoke. My wife was screaming at me. I know that there wasn't any danger of burning the house down since the oven is pretty self-contained, but the idea that I tried to cook anything while blackout drunk was for whatever reason the final straw. I couldn't get the image of causing a fire and not being physically able to help my family out of my head. Haven't had a drink since. Chambus said, "My husband was going to leave me and take our son. I was a disappointment to everybody who loved me. I had been an alcoholic from 19-29 and knew I wouldn't make it to 30 if I didn't go to rehab. I had a seizure and I've thrown up blood more times than I can count. I woke up every morning wishing I could just stop, but I was too far gone, so I failed anytime I tried quitting on my own. My husband and dad told me they couldn't do it anymore, and I knew they meant it. The last time I drank was November 25th, 2019, and I am a completely different person now. I've since had another baby and tried to be the best mother, wife, daughter, sister, and friend every day since then. I look back at who I was and am so ashamed, but I try daily to show myself that I'm not that person anymore. Edit. Spelling errors. Nutrinova said, I'm 40 pounds over, used COVID as an excuse to stop working out, and my BP was hypertensive because I had to be on a medication that raised it in order to silence my digestive system that was screaming at me to change my lifestyle and stop stuffing it with booze and greasy food every day. Tomorrow will be 2 weeks sober, and 5 days off the stomach meds and 2 weeks worth of hitting the gym again. My BP is averaging down and my body is over the dumps from lifting again, but it was brutal. My motivation is that if I can't make these good habits stick, then I don't know if I have it in me to bounce back again from another year of neglect. I feel like I'm on a razor's egg. But today is a good day, and I am capable of carrying this into tomorrow. Jurassic Park Trek Wars said, I wasn't an alcoholic by far, but I quit in July of 2018 and have had less than 4 beers since then. Plus 1 shot of whiskey when my divorce was finalized. But the moment occurred after my birthday out watching my favorite band, and my brother bought all my drinks, so I had like 9 beers, and I'm a small guy who doesn't handle alcohol well anyway. Woke up the next day with a horrible headache, a panic attack, and extremely dehydrated. I know a lot of people say I'm never drinking again, either while drunk or hungover, but I did say that and I meant it. Riflemate in 1992 said, I don't have a drinking problem, but my late fiancé did before, which led to him getting sober for decades until his death. He told me that one of his wake-up calls was that he'd go out to the bars and get totally wasted and black out, then wake up in his car on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere the next day. He'd walk into the nearest gas station and ask where he was, and they'd tell him that he was in a town 3 hours away from where he was partying last night, and he had no idea how he got there. Also, when he quit drinking, he made the decision to quit cold turkey, and the withdrawal almost killed him with seizures and dehydration from vomiting and diarrhea. So if you are reading this and wanting to get sober, please get detox with the help of medical professionals, or at the very least don't do it cold turkey, because alcohol withdrawals can be deadly. If a St. Laurent said, I went on an extremely depressive episode after being sexually assaulted in November, which made me end up in a psych ward, and then that led me to quit a job that made me miserable due to a toxic environment, only to go into another toxic workplace that had a micromanaging doctor who verbally abused not only myself but the rest of the staff. It was like walking on eggshells around them. One day they're happy, trying to treat us to food gifts, then snapping just like that. I also had an issue with another coworker who kept making sexual comments towards me and already had a track record of sexually harassing other coworkers, and I reported it, only to be told it's my fault. I found myself taking comfort in drinking. First, it was on the weekends, everything being a blur as I told myself, hey, it's a reward after having an exhausting week. And then it slowly became a daily habit, going to a bar on weekdays, rather than weekends now. It didn't help that I developed a friendship with the bartender, and because I'm attractive, I got free drinks anywhere I went with other bartenders, and then I would stumble home, drunk. If a St. Laurent said, it wasn't until one night in March, I went to a bar and ended up at another bar, already drunk, and something told me to go home. I called my partner, trying to remain calm, and as I walked up and down this park, I fell hard. This was my official rock bottom, and I knew I had a problem and needed help, as this couple helped me up, asking if I was okay, and I slurred a thank you, I'm okay, and walked to my partner's car, not remembering much else until I woke up the next day, seeing I cut my foot as I fell. I broke down and told my partner I need help, and if I didn't seek it, I would end up going back to the psych ward, and even if I did, maybe it was going to be a good thing. My partner was afraid because, on top of my obvious codependency with alcohol, I was also talking about killing myself, which stressed them out more, and I felt so guilty, so I stopped cold turkey and ended up quitting my job on the spot after said coworker came up to me, screaming in my face that I'm a liar and a whore. I'm okay now and happier. I haven't had any suicidal thoughts and don't care for drinking much anymore. Thank you to anyone who read my story. Pure Economics 8369 said, I never had the I need to stop moment, just clearing that up at the beginning. Someone I know is an alcoholic. He'd drink vodka literally all day. I had to go to his house twice a day for almost an entire year to make sure he was alive, literally. One day we went and he had shit and pissed himself on his couch, lips blue, no gag reflex, etc. Ambulance took him to the hospital and then the mental hospital 13 hours later. 13 hours of not drinking, his BOC was still a .52. I still can't stand the smell of alcohol. I'll occasionally have a beer or a few, but the mere thought of drinking makes me viscerally angry. Event Hawk, I've never had a problem. Faster 1337 said, my first encounter with the shadow people. After drinking for long enough, your brain just breaks and you start to hallucinate. Seeing things that aren't there and hearing terrifying noises. You are scared of every noise you hear, thinking this is it, they are in my apartment. I'm a huge horror fan, and lived in a really rough neighborhood most of my life. I've never been as scared as I was when the shadow people showed up. You aren't asleep, you aren't awake, you're in some kind of hellish limbo. You drift in and out of consciousness and have horrific nightmares of whatever you're afraid of. It's literally your brain panicking and not knowing what to do. I think about them often and I never want to hear or see them again. Now, I'm not a religious person, but I kind of think I saw a glimpse of hell. Never again. Process the Rectifier said, one Christmas Eve, I was coping with some things. At around 6 p.m. I got home from work, pissed off and mad about it. Threw a 24-pack of beer in the passenger seat and started driving. I remember driving to the far side of the city, and the next thing I know it's snowing and I'm doing 70 down the exit ramp near my house. I freaking spin off still doing 70, sliding backward 80 feet down a ditch on the side door of my car. Fell into a retention pond and walked home with frozen clothes. Miraculously I survived. That's when I knew I crossed a line because I had put others in harm's way, not just myself. If drinking causes you to drive drunk, please never drink. Alakat Spagimus said, my ex-husband of 20 years died in 2019 of alcoholic liver failure. He was 52. My father died last month of alcoholic liver failure. He was 73. Both functional alcoholics, degrees, great jobs, etc. Both lifelong drinkers of various degrees. My ex thought because his own alcoholic father lived to be 80 that he too could drink to excess and be fine. Dying this way was very painful physically, mentally. The liver slowly stops working. Ammonia builds up in your body, hallucinations. Ascites and distension, big hard belly, pushed their lungs up so far it was so laborious to breathe. It is not a pretty thing. Please, if you think you have a problem, stop. Alcoholism is a very personal thing. My ex said it didn't matter wife, family, anything else. His drinking was about him and his addiction to alcohol. He didn't think about us or anything else when he was drinking. He would feel bad afterward, but sadly he could just never stop. I wonder if that's how he wanted to die, knowing he was slowly dying. There are signs it's obvious at some point. Please, if you think you have a problem, stop. Please, if you think you have a problem, get help. My sincerest best wishes for anybody who wants to stop. I hope you do. Be well. Papajack 217 said, I still drink occasionally, but I used to black out 3 nights a week. This went on for about 9 years. There was 1 month where, after drinking every weekend, I realized I only had fun on only one of the occasions. The rest of the time was just habit, and I got nothing from the experience except calories and a hangover. I also realized drinking was doing nothing for helping my goals or expectations of myself. I didn't touch alcohol for 3 months to help reinvent myself. All my buddies still drink, so I started having a few when we met up later on. I've drifted away from a lot of them as a result, though, but it's not a bad thing. I'm glad I made the change. Jert3 said, I would do terrible and very embarrassing things and really not even remember what happened. I did not really have a drinking frequency problem, but on the weekends I would have an excess problem. Once I am very drunk, feel like I can drink twice as much. For years in my 20s there were a lot of stories in my social group of embarrassing or bad things I did. I was the only person who didn't know what they were. Ruined relationships with friends and countless gorgeous women. I have done many kinds of drugs, pretty much all besides heroin and meth, and out of all of them, alcohol was the most damaging to me, and alcohol was the one where I got the most way too out of control on. But the worst is not even remembering what happened. Someone could have said I ran naked down Main Street and I wouldn't have ruled it out. Media Sucks 1516 said, I had hundreds of very bads while drinking, but my worst physical experiences was waking up every 3-4 hours, soaked in sweat and tremoring so badly that I had to use a long straw to drink out of a plastic, 32-ounce plastic Powerade bottle of premixed vodka in Powerade. Because I was shaking so badly that I couldn't tilt the bottle to my lips without spilling it everywhere. Then I'd wake up to my alarm at 5:45 a.m. to drink 1/2 pints of vodka, to feed the beast and calm the shakes, before waking my kids up for school at 6:30 a.m. Then I'd take them to school, SMFH. This particular vicious circle went on for 2 months. There's several terrible and worse moments during the addiction process, but go unnoticed by the active alcoholic and addict. The chaos is our comfort. By the grace of my God as I understand him, I'll be 6 years sober on September 11th. Godspeed to us all. Ghoulish Geek said, I was 15. My niece was living with my parents and I because of DCFS. Her older siblings were the reason she was taken away, as they were doing some pretty heavy drugs. All 3 of them are older than me. One day, my niece and I went for a walk. She is 3 years younger than me, and she is my best friend. I had my root beer bottle filled with a mix of root beer and whatever alcohol I could find in the house, vodka, tequila, moonshine, etc. And as I was drinking it, I could tell that she was scared. It was almost as if she thought she was going to be taken away again. The thought of her getting taken away from us made me sick to my stomach, and alcohol didn't even sound good anymore. I poured the rest of it on the ground. Probably not the best idea for the environment, but I was drunk and not thinking clearly. My parents still don't know I was drinking at that age, and I don't plan on telling them anytime soon. I am an adult now, and I barely ever drink. Only on special occasions. DWiki said, daily routine for years, drink until passing out, wake up and puke dry heave bloody bile from torn esophagus, shower, Visine, sip strong smelling energy drinks, chew gum all day to mask last night's alcohol smell, work completely hungover, multiple crippling panic attacks every day, stop by one of my many liquor stores so not even the clerks knew how often I was buying, get home, go to my room to chug just enough booze to stave off withdrawals but still be able to function for a few hours with roommates not knowing, roommates go to sleep, drink until pass out in my room. Repeat. Finally my body-brain started to tell me it was going to end one way or another. The anxiety of the secret was basically causing me to be in a constant panic attack most of the day. Back was starting to ache with just a little activity. Felt like vomiting all day every day. Would put off things like getting my hair cut for fear of breaking down in a panic attack. Relationships were failing, I wasn't reading my mail, never picked up friends' calls. Life became about the booze and covering my tracks. Called and hung up on rehab centers before they answered multiple times, too scared to commit to it. Finally went to my parents and broke down, told them the story above through tears and told them I couldn't quit on my own. The weight of the world left my shoulders that moment. I went to rehab the next day. Detox for about 4 days until my vitals were good, then 21-day inpatient. That was 9 years ago without a single sip since that day. Now, very successful job, hardly think about alcohol, amazing girlfriend, homeowner, and I'm open about my story with everyone that asks. I think my success can be attributed to being completely honest with everyone. After that day I admitted to my parents. Best decision I ever made will ever make. Reddit is gay 69 said. It's funny that most people think there is some form of singular, come to Jesus moment for people to stop drinking like there is in movies. There were plenty of moments that for most people would have been enough. I had seizures that I almost died from, only to leave the hospital desperate for another drink. Got arrested, smashed my face in, wrecked cars. You name it. I was lucky I had people who cared about me enough to force me into rehab, where a bunch of counselors and other addicts verbally smacked me over the head with all the damage I was doing, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. So yeah, not really any particular moment I can single out. I did plenty of dumb stuff. I had a few notable moments after getting sober, but for the most part it was a long and gradual process to develop new habits and ways of thinking that carried me away from my old behaviors. Seizure, Sally said. When it stopped working. From the first moment I got high, drugs and alcohol did something for me that I couldn't so myself. They filled a gap in my soul. Life became bearable once I was fucked up. I could go to school, I could go to work, I could sit quietly in a room by myself without wanting to just fucking die. And drugs and alcohol kept the chaos in my head quiet for about 6 years. After 2 treatment centers, I was homeless and just cruising up and down the East Coast in my car, which was the only thing of value that I had left. I was morally and spiritually bankrupt and hated myself more than anything, but getting fucked up still fixed that. A little bit, at least. Then, one day, I had just shot up in the parking lot of the Virginia Welcome Center on I-95 and was pulling back out onto the highway, just crying uncontrollably. Because it didn't work that time. I was high, but all my problems were still there. I still hurt inside, the pain hadn't even receded just a little. That was the worst moment of my life. I tried for another month or so to get the relief back, but it never came. So I decided that I was either gonna kill myself or go to treatment again. It was a tough choice. I thought about it for a while. I didn't make a conscious decision, but I started driving, made a few calls and ended up in a halfway house. That was 6.5 years ago, been sober since. Copy-paste reply from the last time this was asked. 8.5 years sober, now. Spillerdoing said. I don't think it was becoming a dependency, but it was definitely becoming a problem. It's when I realized I was eating into my overdraft, which is meant to be for covering things like rent when they're due before you get paid, to keep up to the alcohol-fueled party lifestyle, spending twice the cost of weekly groceries every night out and there being multiple nights out a week. I figured it was becoming a problem and took a step back from that whole scenario. I haven't gone cold turkey, but I generally choose not to drink. I can count the number of times I've been drunk since then on my fingers, and it's at least 15 years ago that I stopped. Chandelier said. I only quit a few weeks ago. But there were a few reasons why I quit. I only drank on occasion, but I realized, every time I drank, I had a migraine. It could be 1 drink, 5 drinks, didn't matter, the migraine would onset immediately. I got tired of feeling like shit. Weight gain, self-explanatory. The real wake-up call for me was seeing one of my best friends' health massively decline over the last year. We would get together every week to drink and hang out. Again, I only drank on occasion. What I didn't realize though is that my friend was drinking every day. His hair started thinning, his eyes turned yellow, and his liver started failing. I am so devastated to see him like this. He refuses to quit drinking, and if he doesn't stop, he's going to die.